Oregon fans, what's going on? I was gonna say we're back like we never left, but we did leave for quite a bit. Just got back in town yesterday from a little vacation out to Europe. So definitely, apologies for not having a podcast up for quite a bit. But wanted to enjoy the trip as much as I could. Had a couple late nights with the early signing period, but we're back. We're excited to be here on the podcasting platform. We're back, so we're live on both YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres and on Twitter at Torres Sports. Thank you guys for tuning in to today's show wherever you're tuned in. If you happen to be tuned in live on YouTube, go ahead and hop in the live chat and let me know your thoughts on Oregon's 28-27 win over the North Carolina Tar Heels in the 2022 Holiday Bowl. That's going to be the focus of today's episode. Going to get into some takeaways, maybe a little bit of thoughts on, kind of Oregon's 2022 season. Dan Lanning has wrapped up his first season as a head coach. A lot of new news has kind of come out since then, certainly since the last time I did a podcast. I'm going to have a full separate episode on, Oregon and the early signing period because I haven't been able to really give any of my thoughts on the podcasting platforms over there, but tons of recruiting stuff to talk about. You have Mace Funa, who announced that he would be coming back for the 2023 season, saying, I'm going to run it back, or I'm running it back in 2023 following during that post-game press conference. Stephen Jones also announced that he was going to be coming back for the 2023 season. So Oregon's getting some good news on some big returners, ahead of the 2023 season. And, really since the football season is now over for Oregon, we're going to be expecting, some more news, coming out probably in the coming days, right? We're entering the another portion of the transfer portal window. Now that the bowl game's over, we're going to see some more guys probably entering the transfer portal for Oregon and programs across the country. And then we're also waiting to see some pro decisions, NFL decisions for a number of guys still at Oregon, right? You have Brendan Dorless, who played in yesterday's bowl game. You have Casey Rogers. Still waiting to see what's going to be going on for Oregon when it comes to those guys, right? You still have to see what's going on and how next year is going to look. But with all that being said, let's hop into this game, man. Let's hop into it and talk about some takeaways, some of the best performances of the game and what we were able to really glean from it. I think first and foremost, well, let's get this ticker going here. My bad. There we go. Looking official. Speaking of official, shout out to GUTV. I was kind of scrambling for a shirt because I had some dirty laundry from the trip, and I had this bad boy. So if you guys know me, I went to Gonzaga. Shout out to the Zags. But yeah, okay. Let's not get too sidetracked. So 28-27 win for Oregon. The Ducks went into halftime down 21-14. But how big is it for Oregon just to end the season with a win? I think even though the Holiday Bowl maybe wasn't the bowl that a lot of fans wanted, maybe wasn't that much excitement around the bowl, it wasn't a glamorous bowl. I think certainly for Oregon as a team that was in contention for the playoffs for much of the year, despite that opening loss to Georgia, up until that Washington loss, they really did have a pretty solid chance of making the playoff, right? They were taking care of their business. They looked like a completely different team since that blowout. Bo Nix was playing phenomenal football. The defense was okay, definitely not the strength, but they were doing enough to keep you in games. And the offense was putting up a ton of points. But, things obviously unraveled for Oregon down the stretch in the 2022 season, losing to Washington and then to Oregon State. And then you have Kenny Dillingham taking the head coaching job at Arizona State, Dante Moore flipping to UCLA. So Oregon didn't necessarily have a lot of momentum, but they bounced back about as well as you could possibly have asked for, both on the recruiting trail and then now, on the field, right? I think, especially when you consider guys declaring for the 2023 NFL draft, you had Christian Gonzalez, the best player on Oregon's defense in 2022, declaring for the NFL draft. And for him to, he's opting out of the game, so he wasn't available in yesterday's game. He had Noah Sewell, who declared for the draft. He didn't play. DJ Johnson. So this was a defense that was, missing some really, really key contributors. And I think just about everybody played for Oregon on offense that I can think of. I think they were completely full strength. Bo Nix obviously had a pretty solid game. Not sure he was totally healthy, but let's see. I'm a little rusty having not podcasted for a little bit. So trying to slow myself down and just make sure we kind of break this thing up. So let's just start with the offense, because I think that is the easiest place to start. Let's start with Bo Nix. Bo Nix finishes the Holiday Bowl with a stat line of 23 for 30 for 205 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Also added 6 yards on the ground on 5 carries and was sacked 1 time by that North Carolina defense. So Bo Nix, man, I thought he played a pretty solid game. As I was live tweeting the game and seeing what a lot of fans were saying, a lot of you guys were saying on my timeline, I was kind of interested to, I found myself asking, is Bo really fully healthy? I think, that his ankle wasn't wrapped like it had been in that Oregon State game. He was obviously more healthy than he was in that game against the Beavers, but I don't know if he was completely 100% healthy in that game. You also, just based on the way he was running and kind of setting himself up for some of these throws, there was some video that came out before kickoff yesterday of the field conditions at Petco Park out there in San Diego. And to say they were not the best or subpar, I think would be an understatement. So I'm sure that had had a role in what Bo Nix was able to do from a mobility standpoint and just setting himself up in the pocket. But pretty solid game overall, right? You had the 2 touchdown passes to Troy Franklin and then to Chase Cota late in that game, the game winner. So not the most impressive game from a statistical standpoint for Bo Nix, but I tweeted about it earlier. He showed that he's a savvy vet. Oregon, he led that Oregon comeback, and he had that huge game-winning drive at the very end of the game. That was obviously capped off by that touchdown pass to Chase Cota. He talked about how that was one of the big talking points in the post-game press conference. How he had made that call. He made the call on that game-winning touchdown pass. I thought that was huge. So obviously he's a guy that's super, super comfortable with this Oregon offense. And I think he just really, really showed out. Solid game from Bo Nix. That interception wasn't the best. That interception that he threw, it was kind of a wacky play. And he threw it behind Terrence Ferguson, so it hit Terrence Ferguson's hand, and then it hit the defender's leg. And then there was another defender in the area who was reaching out for the ball and actually kicked the ball. And, just the way that happened, a lot of people were talking about how it looked like he intentionally kicked the ball, but that obviously was not called. So kind of a wonky play, but, at the end of the day, he's got to throw that pass earlier to avoid plays like that. And then obviously North Carolina had some momentum going into the half, but I think that Bo had a solid game. Like I said, not his best game, but you are able to finish the season with a win. I think that's big. And you also are able to finish it healthy for the most part, right? Wasn't completely 100% from the way things looked, but he was able to, not get injured again, which I think is good. I don't think anybody for Oregon was particularly banged up in this game when that thing wrapped up. So important to go into the off season, pretty healthy from a personnel standpoint. But yeah, solid game from Bo. Would have liked to see him run a little bit more. But Bo is Bo. And I think the other point that I kind of had coming out of this game, now that the season's over, Oregon finally has some consistency at quarterback going into next year. I think that is one of the biggest takeaways just from the season, and kind of as we go into the offseason now. Oregon has a returning starter at quarterback for the first time since Justin Herbert, which just feels like it's so long overdue. I think that definitely helps take some of the sting away from Dante Moore's flip to UCLA. Is like, hey, maybe you don't have the guy that you thought you were going to have at quarterback in the 2023 class. But hey, you got Bo Nix back, and you saw what he could do when he was operating at his highest level. You saw this Oregon defense just tearing people up, racking up points. And then let's not forget, Will Stein and Oregon, they were able to flip Austin Novosad from Baylor, pretty much at the 11th hour. So it's not like they had, a bad consolation prize by any means. Austin Novosad is a phenomenal player in his own right. He's in the running for Offensive Player of the Year with Adidas All-American. So I'm excited to, hopefully knock on wood, get out to San Antonio and get my first look at Austin Novosad up close and personal, in person. Maybe not up close and personal, but, up front and in person. Hoping that I can make it out to San Antonio because that's a trip that's booked on Southwest. And if you guys have been traveling during this holiday season, you know that Southwest has just been an absolute train wreck. But that's definitely someone I'm really excited to see at the All-American Bowl from an Oregon perspective, seeing that I'm going out there to cover a lot of these, Oregon commits that are going to be out there. So really excited for that. But let's talk about some of these other performances in this game aside from Bo Nix. That's the point I was getting to, is that it's just really good for Oregon to know who their guy is going to be going into next year. I think there's still some positions that you want to address on this team, particularly at defensive back. Adrian Clem adding some really strong pieces to that offensive line, looking to next year, an offensive line that's losing a lot of veterans. You bring in Ajani Cornelius from Rhode Island, as well as Junior Angelau from Texas, and then some solid pieces from that 2023 recruiting class from the prep rankings. So I think that they're going to be just fine when it comes to the offensive line. But a guy we have to talk about is the offensive player of the game. That is Oregon running back Bucky Irving, finished with 13 carries for 149 yards and 2 touchdowns. Bucky Irving was averaging 11.5 yards per carry. What a game from Bucky Irving. And to think that he is a young guy that's going to be back next year, I think, Carlos Laughlin just has to be super happy with the way he was able to perform this year. Noah Whittington didn't have, as strong of a game, 11 carries for 27 yards. And then Jordan James, 3 carries for 27 yards. So really Bucky Irving stole the show. And I think the thing that was interesting is that a lot of people thought when after Bo threw that interception, why are they not running the ball? It kind of felt like they were taking the ball out of Bucky Irving's hands. And Bucky just proved once again that he is one of the best running backs in the country. I think he doesn't really get the respect that he deserves from a national standpoint. But certainly in the Pac-12, he has to be in the mix for the best running back that the conference has to offer. Had a short touchdown run early in that game, but his longest run of the day was a 66-yard touchdown. And I was watching the highlights again, rewatching the game. And on that 66-yard touchdown run for Oregon, there was just anywhere you looked on that field, just guys getting their hands on a defender and just blocking their hearts out. You got to give a shout out to Cam McCormick, who was originally blocking one guy, but ended up pancaking 2 players on Bucky's run. He ended up cutting it back after he got past Cam. But he was laying some really good blocks. So was TJ Bass on that play. Troy Franklin had a heads up play, looking around for an assignment. And then he just actually ran down with his hands up to make sure that he wasn't, getting hit with a blindside block or anything like that, blocking the back. So heads up play by Troy Franklin. Everybody was just clicking. And I think that you really saw this Oregon offense, even though it wasn't their best showing. I thought that they had a pretty solid day, especially running the ball. I mean, they only ran the ball 32 times. Maybe that feels like a small number because they didn't really have that much from a yardage standpoint. But Bucky Irving had a great game. You can't say enough about that guy. He was quick to give props to the offensive line after he was named the offensive player of the game by the Holiday Bowl committee. But that dude is absolutely special, and you really can't say enough about him and the season that he's had for the Ducks this year. Another note from yesterday's game, he finished the season with 1,055 yards rushing, so his first time rushing for 1,000 yards in a season. And I really don't think that this season could have gone any better for Bucky since transferring from the University of Minnesota last year. Just was everything was going right for him. I think he definitely needed more carries yesterday, but he had a really good game. And then you saw Jordan James get some shine as well after serving as mostly a goal line guy, short yardage guy for Oregon this year. But I know that Oregon's really high on his ability and his upside. But it's just a really crowded room at Oregon. So it was nice to see him get some more carries in this game, and maybe he'll be able to carve out a bigger role moving forward. Really, from a receiving standpoint, right, we were talking about Bo Nix, the running game, but from the receiving standpoint, I think that Terrence Ferguson really stole the show today. Or not today, I guess that was Wednesday during the Holiday Bowl, but he really had a heck of a game. He caught 5 passes off of 7 targets for 84 yards. 56 of those yards came after the catch for a long of 28 yards. So Terrence Ferguson really, I think, just showed why he is, I think, one of the better tight ends in the Pac-12. And I think, I was a little bummed when I saw that Maliki Matavao entered the transfer portal and then ended up going to UCLA, but I think Oregon's going to be okay, especially when you have guys like Terrence Ferguson. I think just the way they were able to get him the ball in space, he just moves really well. I think that he's kept a lot of that mobility from his high school career. Now through 2 seasons at Oregon, he's a guy, when you see him in person, you're just like, that's a dude. That's a dude right there. 6'5", 250 pounds, and he can run. Came up with some big catches in that game for Oregon. And I can't say enough about just how he has improved as a pass catcher and just as a playmaker for Oregon. It's awesome to see the tight ends more involved. Maybe we saw more of Terrence Ferguson in this game because Drew Maringer had a bigger hand in the play calling duties. Drew Maringer and Junior Adams, it was a collective effort from a play calling standpoint, as Dan Lanning said, leading up to that game. But yeah, really, really solid game from Terrence Ferguson. Troy Franklin had that big touchdown. He only had 24 yards receiving, but Terrence Ferguson, Noah Whittington, and Troy Franklin all had 5 catches apiece in this game. That was a big touchdown catch that Troy Franklin had in this game, right? Leading or helping lead Oregon's comeback, in that fourth quarter for Oregon to come back. I think they were down 27-14 at one point in the fourth. Someone might need to fact check me on that, but Troy Franklin puts an exclamation point on a really, really strong season, sophomore season. Finishes 2022 with 904 yards, I believe is what it is, because he was 96 yards shy of 1,000 for the year. So 904 yards is real solid for him. Entered the game tied for the Pac-12 lead in receiving touchdowns, and he got his 9th touchdown catch of the year. So Troy Franklin, man, he had all that buzz coming in 2021 as the highest rated the highest rated receiver in Oregon's 2021 recruiting class. But in Joe Moorhead / Mario Cristobal's offense in 2021, he really wasn't featured too prominently. Definitely didn't get the opportunities down the field that he wanted and definitely deserved. But we really saw Troy Franklin kind of unleashed this year in that Oregon offense, and he had a phenomenal season. And then we also have to talk about Chase Cota. Chase Cota catching that game-winning touchdown. I don't know if you could draw up a better finish to the 2022 season for Oregon and for Chase Cota's career. For Chase Cota to be the guy that catches the game-winning touchdown, someone who grew up going to Duck games, rooting for the Ducks. Took him a little bit to get to Oregon, but ended up transferring to Oregon from UCLA for his final season of college football. Bo Nix said after the game on Chase Cota, and that game-winning touchdown catch, it was great that it was Chase that came down with that touchdown, right? So definitely kind of a little bit of a storybook ending in that game for Chase Cota. who's really been a guy. He was that number two receiver for Oregon that whole year. Got a little bit banged up against Cal, so we didn't see him. We saw him miss a little bit of time, but caught the game when he passed with 19 seconds left. He also had a big 30-yard catch in the fourth quarter. So Chase Cota, we knew he was going to be a playmaker. We knew he was going to be a difference maker for that Oregon wide receiver room heading into the season, and he definitely proved to be just that. And I think that even though it was just one season at Oregon, it was an impactful one, and one that I'm feeling he's pretty happy about. Just getting to see him featured, I think, more prominently ultimately than he was in Westwood in Chip Kelly's offense. So that was another good receiving performance for Chase Cota. We talked about him and Troy Franklin as well. Let's see if we have any other offensive notes here before we take a quick break and switch up to defense, and then we'll get to some of your guys' comments and maybe some questions as well. Definitely want to have a little bit of a mailbag portion in this podcast, get you guys involved and see what's on your minds after this game. So some more offensive notes for Oregon: at least one rushing touchdown in 12 straight games and multiple rushing touchdowns in 9 of 13 games, 400 plus yards of offense in 11 of 13 games this season, and 209 rushing yards were the 10th most in a bowl game in program history. So I think for a lot of people that maybe for people who didn't know, Will Stein wasn't involved in this game. Dan Lanning talked about after hiring Will Stein, he didn't want to put a game on his plate, that soon. It just didn't make that much sense to have him, to ask that of him that soon. But I think that you saw some carryover from the rest of the season, from a play calling standpoint when you come to see what Junior Adams and Drew Maringer ultimately called in this game. Yeah, overall solid game for Oregon from an offensive standpoint. I think that you maybe wanted to see a little bit more of Bo Nix running the ball, but you're able to end the 2022 season on a high note. Not a super sloppy game. I think that you definitely can carry that momentum into the 2023 season. So don't go anywhere. We're going to take a quick break for those of you listening to us on audio, and we got more Oregon football breakdown for you after this. Welcome back to the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, coming to you live on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres, as well as on Twitter at mtorres sports is where you can find me there, talking Oregon's 28-27 win over North Carolina in the 2022 Holiday Bowl. If you guys are on YouTube, do me a quick favor, take a second out of your day, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Just recently passed 2,000 subscribers. Super fired up about that, and I want to continue building the channel and building the community of Duck fans, talking Oregon football and Oregon football recruiting a whole bunch. So let's talk about the defense for Oregon in the Holiday Bowl. I think that Drake May, man, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and was certainly a tough matchup for this Oregon defense going into this game. Like we said, Oregon missing a lot of key pieces there, but they did get Brandon Dorlus for this game. Brandon Dorlus, Casey Rogers, Jordan Riley, a lot of those savvy vets were available in this game. But you saw some young guys stepping up. You saw Keith Brown. I think he got his first start at linebacker. You saw a whole bunch of Jeff Bossa. We've seen him a lot this season, but he had a bigger role since Noah Sewell wasn't playing in this game. You saw younger guys like Jalil Florence get called on in the secondary. You saw Steve Stevens and Jamal Hill in the secondary as well, Bennett Williams. So this, you also saw Jake Shipley. Jake Shipley was one of those guys from the 2021 class that we haven't seen too much of this year, but it was a game where Oregon had to rely on a lot of young guys. And Dan Lanning said after the game, hey, we showed up to this game and we're going to play with the guys that are here. So even though it may not have been the best showing, I think there were definitely some times when Oregon was getting picked apart by Drake May because he is such a talented quarterback. But they did make some plays. Jeff Bossa had a sack. Mace Funa had a sack. Mace Funa had a great game. that kind of will carry him into the 2023 season. But here are some notes on the Oregon defense. Really, really strong second half. Oregon's defense held North Carolina to just 6 points and 120 total yards in the second half, including 0 points and just 16 yards in the third quarter. Multiple sacks in a game for the sixth time this season, albeit without Noah Sewell and DJ Johnson. And then they matched a season high with 6 pass breakups. So I think Oregon's defense, you still didn't maybe see as much from that pass rush as you wanted, especially with a depleted, North Carolina was pretty much depleted all over the field. I think that with all the DBs that they were missing, particularly at corner, you were expecting to see a stronger game, especially passing the ball and stretching the field vertically. We didn't see as much of that as I was maybe expecting. But, even though they were able to squeak out this win, I think it was, a decent game, a good, not great game from the defense. I think the defense still needs a lot of work. This is still a defense that, maybe doesn't necessarily have Dan Lanning, Tosh Lapoi's guys in it just yet, but this recruiting class in 2023, and there's some more pieces in the portal that I think they can add, are definitely going to go a long way in kind of building that Oregon defense to be a better fit to the scheme that they have, the multiple defensive look that they like to present. But I think that Keith Brown had a decent game. There was that play where he kind of got picked on in pass coverage, and Drake May just put the ball in a perfect spot for one of his passing touchdowns. But he was getting some pressure, and I think that he played as well as you could have asked for a guy who hasn't been featured too prominently this year. Justin Flo was another guy that was in that linebacker room, but it looked like Keith Brown was able to find the field a little bit more than Justin Flo was. Justin Flo now, of course, at Arizona. But they were also able to defend the run. That's been a strong point for them all year. North Carolina, 34 carries for 129 yards on the ground, averaging 3.8 yards per carry. Longest run of the day was 24 yards from Drake May. And I think that was a little bit of a point of frustration from an Oregon standpoint. Drake May was able to scramble quite a bit in this game, 12 carries for 45 yards. Some of those runs coming on key third downs, fourth downs. Oregon still isn't able to get off the field on fourth down. I think that was something that we kind of knew and expected going into the game. If North Carolina found themselves in these fourth and short, fourth and medium, I think they were going to go for it, because North Carolina and Mac Brown came into this game knowing that Oregon was stretched thin from a personnel standpoint on their defense. So and it was a close game the whole time. So if you have kind of Oregon backed up against the wall on some of these fourth down plays, why wouldn't you go for it? If I were the coach, I would totally do that. So that was, I think, a little bit of a disappointment for Oregon from a defensive standpoint, just not being super strong when it comes to fourth downs. I'm looking at the numbers now. Let me see if I can find third downs. Third down conversions, 6 for 15. North Carolina was against Oregon. So not the best, but 3 for 3. No. Was it 3 for 3? Let me see. Yeah, 3 for 3 on fourth downs is something that's a little tough to stomach, especially with some missed tackling. You saw things that you saw all year from this Oregon defense once again in the Holiday Bowl. I'm not trying to harp on it too much, but you do need to be critical of the areas for growth, and the defense has been one this entire year. You saw some missed tackling, which obviously doesn't help when you have younger guys in there, but you should still expect those young guys to be fundamentally sound and be able to execute the fundamentals. So missed tackles were a problem in this game for Oregon. The pass rush wasn't great. Like I said, only 2 sacks on the day for Oregon. They had 4 quarterback hurries, so they were getting in there to put some pressure on Drake May, and we did see 2 sacks and 2 tackles, 2 sacks from the defense and 2 tackles for loss for Mace Funa, who tied for a team lead with Keith Brown with 7 total tackles in this game. Triquez Bridges had some good plays, was a good pass breakup. Jaleel Florence was also involved, like I said, in a little bit of a bigger role this year, in this game. So Oregon's defense, that's kind of what I have to say for the most part. But now they got to see if Casey Rogers and Brandon Dorlus I'm kind of interested to see what those guys have in store. It feels like since we haven't gotten an announcement from those guys just yet, unless we get some breaking news here while we're live on the podcast, which wouldn't surprise me. I don't know. It kind of feels like maybe it's trending in that direction for him for those guys to come back. But what else can we talk about with Oregon? I think there's another development that's new today, and then I'll get to some of these questions and comments. A new development today for Oregon: Matt Powledge, the co-defensive coordinator and safeties coach at Oregon, has been named the new defensive coordinator at Baylor. So he returns to Waco after just one season with the Ducks. And a little bit of a, maybe not too surprising of a development, right? I think if you're looking at this from Matt Powledge's standpoint, he's a Texan, so he gets to go home and, be in his home state, and he gets a promotion, right? That's a bigger title for him. I think Oregon safeties, they weren't great this year. They had their moments like any position group, but Matt Powledge, I think, did bring a lot on the recruiting trail. Adding safeties like Tyler Turner and Cody DeCambra in this 2023 class. But they had a lot of guys from Texas that they were involved with in this class, right? You had Johnny Bowens, the defensive lineman, Terrence Green, Tyler Turner, who I already mentioned, Ashton Cozart, Austin Novosad, and then the Ducks are still in a really good spot with Ashton Porter, the defensive lineman out of Cypress, Texas. So I think that Oregon's, I guess you kind of add one and you lose one, right? You lose Matt Powledge to Baylor, and you add Will Stein as your OC and quarterbacks coach, and he's definitely got some Texas ties that came in clutch for the Ducks down the stretch. But now Oregon's losing a couple pieces of their coaching staff, which is normal, right? Any staff is going to have turnover following the season. We had Kenny Dillingham go to Arizona State. You have now Matt Powledge going to Baylor, returning to Baylor after just 1 year. And then you also have another guy who kind of flew under the radar, Coach Vianney Talamaiva, is the new offensive line coach at NAU. And he was really, like I said, an underrated kind of guy on that offensive line staff. I think he played a big role. Obviously, Coach Clem is the guy heading up the offensive line, but so many offensive linemen raved about Coach V, and especially his value as a recruiter. He played a huge role in Oregon closing out with Josh Connerly, and then you had Dave Yulee as well in that 2022 class. So he's been grinding, and he definitely earned that opportunity. But he's another guy that is definitely worth mentioning when it comes to Oregon and the movement there on from the coaching staff. All right, let's get to some of these comments and questions. If you guys have one, make sure to drop it in the comments. The live chat, Tad Fernandez said, "Sko Ducks, Bo Nix, and coach program, silence these haters." Yeah, I think maybe we can talk a little bit about Dan Lanning and finishing his first season as head coach with 10 wins. Things definitely got rocky down the stretch for Oregon in the 2022 season, but I think that 10 wins is a great mark for Oregon in this premier season, debut season with Dan Lanning. I think I asked you guys on Twitter kind of what you were if you thought that Dan Lanning would have had 10 wins in his first season as Oregon's head coach. Let me see if I can find some here. Find some of your responses. Where did I have it? Give me just a second. Okay, so I asked on Twitter. Some people were saying yes with the type of talent that they returned and the staff that they built. I think that it was a reasonable expectation. And then some people were saying, no, I was expecting the playoffs. And I think the playoffs in the first year with Dan Lanning were a tough ask, but it was definitely realistic. So Dan Lanning has shown that, he still has areas to grow as a head coach, right? You have maybe some of the game management with some of his how aggressive he gets on fourth down. That's going to be heralded when it goes well and criticized when it doesn't go well. There's still some areas for him to grow, but as one of the younger head coaches in college football, I think it was definitely an impressive first season for him with the Ducks, and he's only going to get better. I think he's shown that he knows how to hire the right guys. He was saying that during one of his press conferences recently. That there were some hires that I made last year that were questioned by people, and I think that the work and the results speak for themselves. So I think there's reason to be confident in him as the head coach, from assembling the staff, from him as a recruiter. Oregon has the top class in the Pac-12 in 2023 once again. The 2023 class isn't quite over yet, but that he's going to be able to continue recruiting at a high level. So Bo Nix and Dan Lanning are definitely silencing the haters after squeaking out that win in comeback fashion. Maybe a little bit of a crazy game for Oregon fans, especially with Camden Lewis banging in that extra point at the end of the game off the upright. But a win's a win. Shadow Faction 24 says Sco Ducks loved ending the season on a high note. Yeah, this was important, I think, for Oregon to finish the season on a high note, to have a win, goes a long way. And I think it's maybe hard to see too much of that on the surface. I think that definitely is going to pay off behind the scenes, right, for Dan Lanning, maybe trying to get some of these guys that are on the fence, about coming back, to try to parlay that momentum and say, hey, even though things were kind of crazy down the line, we really came together and we were able to, show up when it mattered most, when the game was on the line to get a win. So I think it's absolutely a big plus for Oregon to end the season on a high note with a win, especially with all the crazy recruiting stuff that was going on with Peyton Bowen flipping. I never really thought he was going to end up at Oregon, but that and then some of the coaching turnover, it's definitely great to end the season on a high note. And like I said, even though it wasn't the best bowl game that fans maybe wanted, you get 10 wins, and you can carry some of that momentum into the 2023 season for sure. Jolie talking about, I wonder if Rogers and Dorless are coming back. Yeah, we spoke about that a little bit early on the show. We're gonna have to see if they end up announcing to come back. It seems like Dorless is maybe like a mid-round kind of guy right now. I'm still trying to get better at my projections, but just from from talking about Dorless a little bit with some of my friends, it kind of feels like maybe that's around where he's going to end up if he were to go in the 2023 NFL draft. And I think one of the things with Brandon Dorless and this goes for really any of the premier playmakers, premier players on Oregon's defense, part of the thing that makes it a little tricky to evaluate some of these guys like a Brandon Dorless is that he and DJ Johnson were just so far and above the rest of that defensive front, that defensive line, that it makes it kind of easy for some of these offensive coordinators to kind of scheme around them. And then if you can take them out of the game, then you just obviously minimize their impact. But if you have multiple dudes on that defensive line, it's going to make it harder for them to kind of get slowed down. And I think that maybe that could just help Brandon Dorless take even a bigger step forward. I think he's continued that progression year to year. And then he has an opportunity to come back in 23 if he wants to choose to do that and get even better. And you have a full year in that new system, so you have some continuity there. You don't have to adjust to another new defensive coordinator. I'm seeing a lot of people talking about, oh man, Tosh Lupoi needs to get fired. Look, it's just a take that I really do not agree with. The Oregon defense was not great in 2023. I will fully admit that. But Tosh Lupoi is absolutely instrumental to getting this Oregon program to where it needs to be. Oregon's big splash in 2023 on early signing day, you don't get guys like Mateo Uiagalelei or Johnny Bowens in this class without Tosh Lupoi. Tosh Lupoi is a huge piece of this program, and really, I think, proves himself as a recruiter every time. And recruiting isn't everything. Recruiting is not everything, but he is super, super valuable to Oregon and what they want to do. So maybe obviously it looks like he has some room to grow as a defensive coordinator. It was his first year as a defensive coordinator, I believe. So you have to have some confidence that he's going to be able to continue growing. But I'm a big Tosh Lupoi fan, especially if you're going to be able to get results like Oregon has been getting on the recruiting trail. All right. Christopher has a question here. Christopher asks, am I the only one worried about the quarterback position? I seem to be the only one worried about Bo playing bad Bo for stretches of big games, but then turns it on a dime. Yeah, I mean, I'm not too concerned about the quarterback position for Oregon. I think that now that the season's over, you can confidently say that you got more of good Bo than bad Bo. But there were some stretches where he didn't play that great, sure, but he definitely took a lot better care of the ball this year. He made a huge impact as a playmaker, improvising and throwing on the run and making defenses pay when they, overran in the backfield. So he was a huge asset in the run game. Would have liked to see him get, a little bit more involved there, but I think that the quarterback position is great for Oregon right now. I think you don't have a whole lot of depth behind Bo Nix, but you got to have a lot of confidence if you're Oregon going into next season with Bo Nix as your quarterback. You finally have some consistency there, like I talked about earlier. And you have to have confidence when you have a vet who understands the game and is able to make the adjustments that you need when you're in big time situations. So even though there were some splashes of not the best play for Bo, you're going to have hiccups. Any quarterback's going to have hiccups at times during the year. And then he obviously got banged up, which didn't help at all. But I think that I'm still confident with Bo, even though Kenny Dillingham has moved on. I think that even though Kenny Dillingham is no longer at Oregon, you saw what worked. So now Will Stein, part of what he's going to have to do is tailor that offense to Bo Nix's strength. Get him out on the run, maybe get him some simple reads, and let him use his legs, and then just kind of you want to tailor your offense to some of your best playmakers, and that obviously starts for Oregon at the quarterback position. So I think Bo Nix really turned a new leaf in Eugene this year. So I got to say, I don't agree with this comment, Chris, but I'm here for all the discussion. Brooks said, no such thing as, quote, bad Bo. He's clearly not 100% in regards to his ankle, plus every quarterback making mistakes. Yeah, that was pretty much kind of what I was saying. So just building on my last point a little bit. No quarterback's perfect. I think that the biggest mistake that you saw from him in that last game in the Holiday Bowl was that interception, which was super, super wacky. But if he's throwing that ball on time, then that play ultimately isn't happening. So definitely some room to clean things up there. All right, what do we have here? Yeah, Shadow Faction talking a little bit again about Oregon recruiting, saying, I wonder if Oregon has a chance with Nicholas Harbor. Yeah, that was one of the bigger recruiting developments that just came out today, right on Thursday. Nicholas Harbor out of Washington, D.C., Archbishop Carroll High School, top uncommitted player in the country. I think he's number 16 nationally. Going to be taking an official visit to Oregon on January 27th, checking in from the Under Armour All-American Bowl in Orlando today. He's taken a visit to Oregon before, so Oregon already has a positive impression to build off of. But this is one of those guys, where Oregon can benefit from him having a more drawn-out recruitment. It looks like he's going to be making his college commitment on February 1st, so on the second signing day. And I think that you have to figure that Oregon has a shot here in this recruitment. Now, it's important to know with Nicholas Harbor that schools like South Carolina, schools like Michigan have had most of the buzz throughout this recruitment. But look at what Oregon did during the early signing period, getting guys like Mateo in the fold, flipping guys like Dalen Austin. You'd be hard-pressed to find a school that has more recruiting juice than Oregon right now. And you want to parlay that momentum into a recruitment like this one with Nicholas Harbor, with a recruitment like Ashton Porter, who was also at the Under Armour All-American Bowl. A guy like Roderick Pleasant, who's one of the top cornerbacks in the country that they're still looking at. Jamari Johnson, another guy that they're looking at in this 2023 class out of Inglewood. So I think that I wouldn't say Oregon is the favorite for Nicholas Harbor right now by any means. I think they definitely have some ground to make up, but it looks like they might end up getting one of those they could possibly get that final official visit from Nicholas Harbor, seeing that he's coming out to Oregon on January 27th. And I think you're looking at 3 days usually for an official visit. So 27th is a Friday, 28th and 29th. And then you have you have signing day on February 1st. So Oregon very well could get the final visit for Nicholas Harbor. And we all have seen how important timing is with recruiting and how much it can benefit a school to get that final visit. All right, what else do we have? Gerard was talking about Harbor, saying there's a video out there of 6'5" and 245-pound Harbor running 100 meters on a track in less than 10.3 seconds. That should not happen. Yeah, Nicholas Harbor has long been billed as one of the freakiest guys in the 2023 class, regardless of position. He's been billed as an athlete. He's made some noise as an edge rusher. But the interesting thing is he's looking to play offense at the next level as kind of a tight end wide receiver hybrid. And Oregon already has Kenyon Sadiq in the 2023 class signed. I think that they're still in a good position when it comes to Jamari Johnson out of Inglewood. He's going to be making his final decision, committed to Louisville right now. He'll be making his final decision on January 7th at the Adidas All-American Bowl. So we're going to have to stay tuned there. But Nicholas Harbor is a guy that you don't turn away, and you definitely want to get on your team in one way or another. And he didn't shut the door on being a pass rusher as well, playing some defense, on some pass rushing plays. So he's a freak, going to be a big name to track on the recruiting trail for Oregon. I'm going to have a story out later today talking a little bit more about the top recruits that Oregon is still in the mix for in the 2023 recruiting class post early signing period. All right, here we go. What else do we have here? TK asks, is it possible that Ty Thompson is better than Bo by next year? I mean, it's possible, but I don't think that I would that's where I stand right now. I think that I think a lot of people did hope that Ty Thompson would be further along in his development right now, but he also hasn't been put in the best situations with the starters. I was happy to see him play more this year, but it's more or less the same result every time we see Ty Thompson on the field. The offense has some hiccups. It's not looking super smooth. He doesn't really look all that comfortable when he's in the game. But I'm definitely rooting for Ty Thompson, and we're gonna have to see what happens with that Oregon quarterback room next year, because Jay Butterfield's in the portal, and you definitely need to add some more bodies in that room. All right, what else? Let's see. Lionel Irving says, great win, go Ducks. Wait until you see who Dan the Man has coming from Georgia. #portal. Yeah, this is an interesting one, because I think, especially after Dan Lanning got hired, a lot of people were saying, they were highlighting Georgia players that went into the transfer portal as, possible guys that would end up at Oregon. And that ultimately didn't happen. They don't have any former Georgia guys that followed Dan to Oregon. But hey, they're making some noise at Alabama, right? You have Kyrie Jackson, the Alabama transfer cornerback, who ended up going to Oregon. And then you have Trayshawn Holden, the former Bama wide receiver. So Oregon's adding some big time talent in the portal. Another guy, Justin Jacobs at linebacker. I think that linebacker is absolutely a priority that you really need to add some more bodies at. I think that if there was like a spot that I really thought they would do more at on the recruiting trail, it would be linebacker. Jerry Mixon was the only true linebacker I think that they signed in the 2023 recruiting class from the prep rankings, but that's a dude. Jerry Mixon is a dude. He's 6'2", 6'3", 225, plays a variety of positions, played linebacker, running back, even played some quarterback for Sacred Heart this year. So he's a guy I'm really excited about when it comes to what he could do at Oregon and kind of the upside that he has as a linebacker. But that's going to do it for us here on this episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Appreciate you guys tuning in wherever you tuned in. Do me a favor, important to lock in on the social media platforms at mTorres Sports is where you can find me on Twitter, on YouTube. Oregon Football Max Torres is the channel. Always like to have the podcast up there on YouTube as well for that multi-platform excellence. And we're going to have another episode in the very near future where I want to give some more thoughts on Oregon's 2023 signing class, recruiting class. So make sure you guys keep an eye out for that. But you can make sure to find my written work on ducksdigest.com. And then do me a big favor and share the Ducks Dish podcast with your friends, with your family, and with other Duck fans. You know the rules, but felt great to be back here on the podcast. Definitely missed it during vacation, but appreciate you guys taking some time out of your day to talk some Duck football with me. And we will see you guys in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.